Welcome back. It's been a while since we last saw each other on this channel, and I want to share with you today in this video an interesting article I read on the Italian morning paper Repubblica. It's an interview released by a very famous Israeli writer, David Grossman, and I want to share this interview with you. Grossman, it's genocide. It breaks my heart, but now I have to say it. For many years, I refused to use this word. Now, however, after the images I saw, what I read and what I heard from people who were there, I can't hold back from using it, explained the Israeli writer. In the time between the first contact of this interview and the moment in which it actually happened, less than 24 hours, 103 people died in Gaza, 47 while trying to reach food aid, 7 of hunger, the others in several Israeli military operations. David Grossman has read, like the writer, the figures on arent, and this interview starts from here. Dictated, he explained, by feeling of inevitability, I feel the inner urgency to do the right thing. And this is the time to do it, he explained to us. Sometimes you can really understand things just by talking about them. Let's start with the numbers. This is the first question. When you read the death toll in Gaza, what do you think? I'm sick, even though I know that those numbers pass through the control of Hamas and that Israel cannot be the only culprit of all the atrocity we are witnessing. Despite this, reading in a newspaper or listening in a conversation with friends in Europe, the combination of the words Israel and hunger, doing it starting from our history, from our alleged sensitivity to the suffering of humanity, from the moral responsibility that we have always said we have towards every human being, and not only towards Jews. All this is devastating, and it confuses me, not from a moral point of view, but personally. I wonder, how could we get to this point, to be accused of genocide? Even just pronouncing the word genocide in reference to Israel, to the Jewish people, this would be enough. The fact that there is a combination to say that something very bad is happening to us. An Israeli Supreme Court judge once said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And here it happened to us. Occupation has corrupted us. I am absolutely convinced that the curse of Israel was born with the occupation of the Palestinian territories in 1967. Maybe people are tired of hearing about it, but that's how it is. We have become very strong from a military point of view, and we have fallen into the temptation generated by the absolute power and the idea that we can do everything. You used the forbidden word genocide in an article published a few days ago on Haaretz, Israeli jurist, or it can be called what is happening in Gaza a betrayal of the victims of the Holocaust. On the New York Times, Israeli historian Omer Bartov wrote, I study genocides. I'm able to recognize one when I see it. A genocide is underway in Gaza. Do you agree? For years, I refused to use this word, genocide, but now I can't hold back from using it after what I read in the newspaper, after the images I saw, and after talking with the people who have been there. But you see, this word serves mainly to give a definition of the legal purposes. I instead want to speak as a human being who was born within this conflict and had his entire existence devastated by the occupation and the war. I want to speak as a person who did everything he could not to call Israel genocidal state, and now with immense pain and with a broken heart, I have to see that it is happening before our eyes. Genocide is an avalanche word. Once you pronounce it, it only grows like an avalanche, in fact, and it brings even more destruction and more suffering. Where do you go from here? We have to find a way out of this association between Israel and genocide. First of all, we must not allow those who have anti-Semitic feelings to use and manipulate the word genocide. And then we have to ask ourselves a question. Are we capable as a nation? Are we strong enough to resist the germs of genocide, hatred, and mass murders? Or do we have to surrender to the power that guarantees us the fact of being the strongest? I hear people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, two far-right Israel ministers, say that we have to rebuild the settlement in Gaza. What do they say? Don't you remember what happened when we were there with the mass killing hundreds of Israel civilians, women and children, without us being able to protect them? We didn't leave Gaza out of generosity, but because we couldn't protect our people. The great mistake of the Palestinians lies in the fact that they could have turned it into a flourishing place. Instead, they succumbed to fanaticism and used it as a launch pad for missiles against Israel. If they had made the other choice, perhaps this would have pushed Israel to give up the West Bank and put an end to the occupation years ago. Instead, the Palestinians were unable to resist to the temptation of power. They shot us, we shot them, and we found ourselves in the usual situation. If we and they had been more political mature, braver, the reality could have been completely different. And this is another question. Why aren't there millions of people on the street in Israel to stop all this anger, massacres? Why is there always only a minority of the country in the square? This is the answer. Because not seeing is easier, and surrendering to fear and hatred is very simple. Even more so after October the 7th. You were here in those days. You can understand when I say it was horrible. Many people still don't understand what it meant for us. Many people I know since that day have abandoned our common leftist values, have given in. to fear, and suddenly their life has become easier. They have felt welcome by the majority. They no longer need to think without understanding that the more you give in to fear, the more you are isolated and hated outside of Israel. Life is the story we tell each other. It applies to everyone. But when you are Israel, surrounded by neighbors who don't want you in this region, like Syria, and you start to lose Europe's support, isolation grows and you find yourself in an ever deeper trap from which it is complicated to get out. In fact, you risk not being able to get out of it. The silence of the majority risks overwhelming everyone, Israelis and Jews, including those who disagree. You know what happened? This is another question that is asking by the Repubblica interviewer. You know what happened in the last few days in an autogrill in Milan. Then there was the ship that was not allowed to dock in Greece. Israeli artists and writers have seen themselves withdraw invitation abroad despite having criticized the government. Do you ever think that it can happen to you too? Of course, I think about it. It would be the sign of the times in which we live. It would be unpleasant, but this won't be stopping me from saying what I think. I believe that listening to the idea like mine right now is essential for Israel and for those who love Israel. Another question. You said that everything was born with the occupation. You wrote in The Yellow Wind, and it was in 1987. Let's talk about the West Bank then. In Europe, there is still talk of two states, but it is enough to leave Jerusalem to see that there is no longer physically room for two states. The colonies are eating the land of the Palestinians. I remain desperately faithful to the idea of the two states, mainly because I see no alternative. It will be complex, and both we and the Palestinians will have to behave in a political mature way in the face of the attacks that will certainly take place, but there is no other plan. The question, what do you think of the recognition of the Palestinian state proposed by Macron? I think it's a good idea, and I don't understand the hysteria that has welcomed it in Israel. Maybe dealing with the real state, with real obligation, not with the ambiguous entity like the Palestinian Authority, will have its advantages. And it is clear that there must be very specific condition, no weapons, and the guarantee of a transparent election from which anyone who thinks of using violence against Israel is banned. At the end of this conversation, I would like to ask you to respond to those who, there are many who say that you, Israel intellectuals, have not said or done enough to stop what is happening in Gaza. I believe that it is unfair to target those who have fought for the occupation for 70 years, who have invested most of their lives and careers in this battle. When this war began, we were in a total state of despair for having lost everything we had believed and loved. I believe that our slow reaction was natural and understandable. It took us time to understand what we felt and what we thought and then to find the words to say it. Those who were looking for a real-time reaction had to look for it somewhere else. I speak for myself and for those I see at the demonstrations every week for years now. Our heart is in the right place and beats in a reality that is heartless. And this is the very interesting interview I want to share with you. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.